Lurkers explores the dark side of the online world. It contains adult themes and disturbing content for mature audiences only.
It's dark. The summer heat clings to the walls. A bedroom door eases open, and Patricia walks out barefoot and holding her breath. She leaves on the bed a body-shaped bundle under the blanket. Clothes and pillows arranged to look like she's asleep. She knows to move quickly, but quietly. Outside, a white pickup awaits at the curb. The lights are off, and the passenger door opens. She smiles and slips in. The engine starts, and the vehicle begins to move. Patricia insists she doesn't want to go. Her voice thins and frays. The truck speeds up around the block. Inside, she argues. She insists, then turns to desperate screams. But the night quickly swallows the sounds. In a world where connection is effortless, every click feels safe. But online, trust can be deceiving. This is Lurkers, true stories of trust, desire, and how technology, if unchecked, can turn it all against us. It's Bakersfield, California, and Patricia Jocelyn Alatorre was 13. Those who loved her called her Patty. She sang along to music videos in her room, posted goofy clips with friends, and made faces at the camera. According to BakersfieldNow.com, her family described her as sweet, spunky, and intelligent, full of the restless energy of someone with her whole life ahead of her. Then, on July 2nd, 2020, the morning light poured across Patricia's room. Her mother opened the door and pulled the blanket over the bed, but when she leaned over, clothes and pillows, her child was not there, and the air left the room. She called her, but the phone rang, and then only Patricia's usual voicemail. Panic entered the house, and they called the police. As per ABC7 Los Angeles, detectives began with the frame they had. A neighbor's camera held a piece of that night. Close to midnight, Patricia had stepped outside. A white pickup floated in the grainy dark near the curb, and after a moment, it carried her away. Can you imagine, just for a second, the dread that her parents felt? So detectives started to move quickly. They asked for tips and published a description of the vehicle last seen near Whipple Road and Hoskin Avenue. They worked the immediate circle in the first 24 hours. Friends, neighbors, and the school resource thread. Early reports mentioned police spoke cautiously. They initially believed Patricia had run away. The discovery of the decoy under the covers, the classic runaway disguise, reinforced that possibility at first. But as hours turned into interviews and data pools, that same detail began to feel different. Not a harmless prank, a deliberate plan. A plan shaped by someone older on the other side of a screen. On On Friday, July 3, 2020, detectives widened their circle even more. They walked door to door with still frames from a neighbor's Ring camera, asking for anything that looked like that older white pickup. They checked alleys and driveways, noted distinctive trim, and ran partial plate combinations through DMV. Patrol units cruised the block at staggered hours to see who came and went. The description went out across shifts and social posts. Steady, methodical, the kind of work that looks quiet until it isn't. By evening, a handful of tips converged. Neighbors had seen a white pickup more than once in the late nights leading up to Patricia's disappearance. Detectives logged times, angles, and routes. The vehicle thread was beginning to hold. And then, on Saturday, July 4th, 2020, another trail turned digital. With consent and warrants, investigators moved into Patricia's phone and accounts, pulling login times and device IDs, tracing handles across platforms, and requesting a targeted slice of carrier records. In those returns, a thread appeared. A contact, a much older person who had been reaching out for weeks. According to court documents summarized by 23 ABC News, the conversations were on Instagram, beginning with flattery, shifting to requests for intimate photos, offers of money for sex, and escalating to threats to leak the images. So detectives obtained IP data from Instagram, linked it to a T-Mobile account in his name, and then to that white Ford pickup in Inglewood. Yes, investigators mapped the messages against towered pings and the sightings of the white truck. And the two paths began to cross. The digital identity and a real vehicle with a registration that pointed south toward Los Angeles County. The picture was still blurry, but by the end of the day, it was a picture nonetheless. By Sunday, July 5th, 2020, they had these two tracks running in parallel. The physical, make model, a distinctive trim, a white pickup tied to Los Angeles County. Then the digital, a handle, a phone number, a carrier trail. The two threads had begun to cross. As per court document summaries, investigators linked an account to a real name and a real truck. So the next day, on July 6, detectives traveled to an address in Inglewood connected to the name and truck in the investigation. Detectives knocked at the door, and a man answered. They separated him from the vehicle and asked for a conversation. In the interview room, he began distant. He said he didn't know her. But as the interrogation continued, he admitted him and Patricia had just exchanged a few messages. Then he felt a compelling need to add, yes, they had met once. Detectives dug deeper, and once turned into meeting her twice. Court TV's early coverage confirmed there were two meetings. And here is where they began to understand what happened. In the first meeting, he forced an act she never consented to. Oral sex. She was 13. He was 24. The imbalance was absolute. On the second night, the night we opened with, Patricia had built the decoy in her bed and stepped into his waiting truck. As described in redacted court records, later summarized by local reporters, he drove away. She told him she didn't want to go. Patricia resisted. He attacked. He strangled her. then continued to do what he came for, even after she was deceased. And that is all we need to say. Afterwards, he traveled back from Bakersfield to Inglewood and slept in his truck. Because, why not? Then bought lighter fluid and burned her body near a parking lot behind a construction vehicle before fleeing. Quite monstrous. Back in the interview, the man's story closed in on itself. The truck, the messages, the route between counties. By the evening of Monday, July 6, 2020, he was under arrest on a dozen felony counts tied to Patricia's disappearance and death. And news outlets all over released that man's name, Armando Cruz. The case entered a different kind of time, measured in minutes orders and continuances. July 2020 brought Cruz's arraignment and an initial non-guilty plea to a dozen felony counts: murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and other related charges. The calendar was filled with status conferences and discovery exchanges. On paper, the story of a child's life became docket lines and file stamps. Early in the proceedings, Cruz's defense attorneys moved to close pretrial hearings to bar the press and public from the room. The First Amendment Coalition pushed back. Their director, David Snyder, said there is, quote, "a very high bar for closing courtrooms. We don't do secret prosecutions in this country," end quote. The judge kept the doors open, and the record stayed public. Over months, the state outlined what the investigation had already uncovered: the white pickup tied to late-night sightings, the digital forensics from accounts and a carrier, the interview in Inglewood on Monday, July 6, 2020, and the path south after the killing. None of it could return Patricia. All of it pointed in one direction. Hearings bled into seasons, then a turn. On Tuesday, October 4th, 2022, in open court, he pleaded guilty to murder, rape, kidnapping, and other charges. The plea removed any doubt about what happened and spared a trial that would have revisited the worst moments in greater detail than a family should have ever to hear. 4 weeks later, on Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. NBC Los Angeles and local stations confirmed the outcome. In court, Deputy DA Christine Joy Antonios called the crime, quote, "unbelievably horrific," end quote, a phrase that sits like iron in the transcript. As per Law and Crime, the judge spoke about a life cut short and a loss the law could not repair. In Bakersfield, people bought candles. They gathered for a vigil. A mural went up downtown. Sunflowers and sky. Patricia's name in color. They spoke of her as sunshine. The community refused to let a predator decide how she would be remembered. They said her name out loud. And yes, we told Patricia's story the way the investigation and the world learned it, frame by frame. But no one wakes to a full script. It's easy to judge after the fact. It's easy to think about the many things you would have done. But if you don't stay present, you could wake to an empty bed, just like Patricia's mother did. Patricia's parents were not to blame. Patricia was not to blame. None of us were impeccable at 13. There is no manual for parents who grew up in another time, only the ache of learning while the rules keep changing. What doesn't change is fault. Human nature. It belongs to the predator who hid behind the screen. Because Patricia Alatorre should be here, in school, with friends, celebrating birthdays, still loving late summer sunflowers. Instead, there is a mural and there is a sentence. For a while, even the courtroom became a question about light and doors, as the First Amendment Coalition chronicled. The fight was to keep the proceedings open so the public could see what justice looked like in daylight. So maybe what remains is attention in such a digital age, the kind that sits at a kitchen table and listens, the kind that notices when secrecy, speed, and isolation braid together, the kind that asks who's on the other side of the screen without turning the question into an interrogation. Awareness, unfortunately, is not always a cure, but it is a hand on the lamp. If a single conversation begins because of her name, if one young person carries a line they can use when a chat turns wrong, then some small part of Patricia moves forward with us. Her name will never cease to have meaning. Remember Patricia Jocelyn Alatorre, and remember, stay aware, stay present, stay safe. This episode of Lurkers was written by me, Frank Battiston, research and story development by Julia Lawrence, and production and sound design by Daniel Erdenivia. If this story resonated with you, share the podcast with someone you care about. Come on, leave us a review or rating so others can find Lurkers, and follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss the next case. See you in the next one, and thank you for listening.